We all have this fascination with the idea of lost ancient technologies, right? These moments where it seems like our ancestors were just centuries ahead of their time. Well, today, we're diving deep into one of archaeology's most famous and controversial examples, the Baghdad Battery. This is a discovery that, if true, could literally rewrite our entire understanding of the ancient world.
I mean, just think about that question for a second. Could electricity have existed 2,000 years ago? It sounds kind of crazy, but it's the whole mystery here. So forget everything you learned in science class about Alessandro Volta in the 1800s. We're going to go way, way back to the ancient Persian Empire.
So this is the artifact we're talking about. It was found sitting in the archives of the Iraq Museum by an archaeologist named Wilhelm König. At first glance, it just looks like a small, simple clay pot, but it's what's inside that's so interesting. A copper tube, an iron rod stuck inside of that, and the whole thing sealed up with asphalt. This very specific construction led König to a truly shocking hypothesis.
So could this little pot really be a battery? Let's unpack the theory that has captivated historians and inventors for decades. It all boils down to a pretty basic scientific principle.
Okay, quick science lesson. This is a galvanic cell, which is basically the textbook definition of a battery. All you really need are two different kinds of metal, and then you stick them in an acidic or salty liquid. That's your electrolyte. This sets off a chemical reaction that gets electrons flowing, and guess what? The Baghdad artifact just happens to have all three of those key ingredients. The theory is pretty straightforward. You pour in something acidic, like grape juice or vinegar. That liquid kicks off a reaction between the copper and the iron, and boom, you get a steady flow of electrons. You've got an electric current. So, in principle, it's a totally functional, if simple, battery.
And here's the kicker. It actually works. People have built modern replicas, including a famous one on the show Mythbusters, and they've all generated a small but definitely real electrical current. We're talking around 1.5 volts, which is about the same as a modern AA battery. So, we know the device could produce electricity. The real question is, what for?
And this is where the speculation just runs wild. The most popular theory is for electroplating, or gilding, coating cheaper metals with a super thin layer of gold. Some people have suggested a medical use, maybe to apply a mild current to numb pain. That's a practice we know existed in other forms. Or maybe it was a bit of ancient magic, a ritual device used by priests to create a mysterious tingling sensation, proving their divine connection to the worshippers.
It's an absolutely fantastic story, right? But like all extraordinary claims, you have to ask yourself, where's the proof? And this is where we need to pump the brakes, because the skeptic's case paints a very, very different picture.
The historian Spencer McDaniel puts it perfectly. An extraordinary claim, like, hey, ancient people had batteries, requires extraordinary proof. It's not enough to say it could have worked, you have to show that it did. And when we start looking for that proof, well, we run into some major problems.
Let's just break it down. When you think about a battery system, you expect to find certain things. But with this artifact, the evidence just isn't there. For starters, if it's a battery, where are the wires? How do they connect anything to it? The top is sealed shut with asphalt, which makes it really hard to connect anything, or even to refill the liquid inside. And maybe most importantly, archaeologists have never, ever found a single device it could have powered, or a single ancient text that even hints at this kind of technology.
Okay, so if the evidence for a battery is looking pretty thin, what else could this thing be? Well, it turns out that mainstream archaeology has a much simpler and, frankly, much better supported explanation.
This really is the key question, isn't it? The most likely answer isn't found in some wild theory about lost technology, but in other very similar artifacts that were discovered just a few miles away.
The most widely accepted theory today is that these were simply storage jars for sacred scrolls made of papyrus or parchment, and we have good reason to believe this. Archaeologists at the nearby ancient city of Seleucia found very similar clay jars, also with metal cylinders inside, that still had the decayed remains of scrolls inside them.
And remember that acidic residue that the battery people say was the electrolyte? Well, it turns out that when papyrus or parchment rots away for centuries, it can also produce acidic liquids. So the evidence fits this much more mundane, but historically consistent explanation perfectly.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second and place this artifact in its proper historical context, because we really shouldn't underestimate ancient craftsmen. Their real, verified achievements are, you could argue, way more impressive than some mythical battery. And here's the thing.
Ancient civilizations didn't even need electricity for that gilding we talked about. They had incredibly sophisticated methods like diffusion bonding and mercury gilding. We have tons of physical evidence for these techniques. So we should be celebrating their true, proven ingenuity instead of chasing a theory that has zero hard evidence to back it up.
And this timeline really puts it all into perspective. The documented history of the battery starts around 1800 with Alessandro Volta. To believe the Baghdad artifact was a battery, you have to believe that this incredible technology was invented, used for, well, we don't know what, and then was completely lost for almost 2,000 years, leaving absolutely no trace in the historical or archaeological record. It's a pretty big leap of faith.
So at the end of the day, the Baghdad Battery is almost certainly not a battery. It's a fantastic thought experiment for sure, but it's a story that's built on what's possible, not on what's proven. It's a great reminder that history is really a detective story. And while the most sensational theory is often the most exciting, the truth is usually found by just following the hard evidence. So that leaves us with a question. What do you think is the greater marvel? A hypothetical lost technology or the proven mind-blowing genius of ancient craftsmen?